bell. Please, you have to check under your motorcycles right now. 7-year-old Emma Russo stood in the shadows of Budro's restaurant, her small body shaking as she faced 9 men. Everyone in town whispered about the Bayou Brotherhood, bikers who had been called outlaws for 12 years. But Emma had seen something in the parking lot of her grandfather's bait shop that afternoon, something that made her stomach feel sick in a way she couldn't explain. Deputy Marshal Craig Winters, the man everyone called a hero, carefully placing something under their motorcycles while talking on his phone about finally cleaning up this town. Now those men were finishing their meals, with no idea what was happening. And outside, police sirens screamed in the distance, getting closer with each passing second. Emma had maybe 2 minutes to decide: stay quiet and hidden, or tell the truth to men who scared her. Her next words would change everything. The September air in Thibodaux hung thick and sweet, carrying the smell of crawfish boil from nearby restaurants and the earthy smell of the swamp that wound through town like a dark ribbon. Budro's restaurant sat on Highway 1, an old building with cypress wood walls and a metal roof that had survived 3 hurricanes. The neon Abita beer sign in the window blinked on and off, casting orange shadows across the gravel parking lot. Emma pressed herself against the rough wood boards of the building's outside wall, her old sneakers crunching on oyster shells scattered under the raised foundation. Through the window, she could see them: 9 men in leather vests with patches that showed they belonged to the Bayou Brotherhood Motorcycle Club. Their vests showed a coiled water snake over a fleur-de-lis, and across their backs were words that made parents pull their children closer in grocery stores. The leader sat at the head of the table, a man named Jacques Gator Landry, in his mid-50s with silver-streaked dark hair tied back and a face worn by years of riding through Louisiana sun and storms. Around him sat his brothers, men with road names like Swamp Dog, Rue, and Cypress, each carrying stories written in scars and tattoos. Emma knew their reputation. Everyone in Lafourche Parish did. Teachers warned students about them. Store owners watched them carefully. Police drove past their clubhouse on Bayou Road more than anywhere else. They were outsiders, troublemakers, dangerous. But Emma also knew something else. Last spring, when her grandfather's truck broke down on the Levee Road during a flash flood, it was Rue who had stopped, who had worked in knee-deep water for an hour getting the engine running, who had refused her grandfather's offer of money, saying only, "We take care of our own down here, Cher. You're Louisiana. That makes you family." Her grandfather had cried that night, not from fear, but from shame at his own unfair judgment. That memory came back now as Emma watched Gator throw his head back, laughing at something Swamp Dog said. They looked so normal, sharing plates of boudin and glasses of sweet tea. It made what she had to do even more scary. The restaurant door felt impossibly heavy. The hinges squeaked as Emma pushed it open, and conversation got quiet as 9 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Her mouth went bone dry. "Little girl you lost?" The voice belonged to a younger member with sleeve tattoos of cypress trees and alligators. Emma's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I need to talk to y'all." Gator leaned back in his chair, his face careful. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Even Marie, the 65-year-old waitress who had worked at Budro's since before Emma was born, had frozen with a pitcher of tea held in midair. "You need to talk to us," Gator repeated, his Cajun accent softening his words. "What's your name, petite?" "Emma. Emma Russo. My papa." You helped him with his truck on the levee. Recognition crossed Rue's bearded face. "I remember. Old blue Chevy. Your papa makes the best crab traps in the parish." Emma took a step closer, then another. Her legs felt disconnected from her body. "You have to look under your bikes. Please, there's something there. Something bad. I saw Deputy Marshal Winters putting it there. I heard him talking on his phone about it being time to cut the cancer out of Thibodaux." The air changed instantly. Hands tensed, eyes sharpened. Gator stood slowly, his chair scraping against the worn wooden floor. "What exactly did you see, Emma?" Before she could answer, sirens screamed into the parking lot. Through the window, Emma saw 3 parish sheriff's cars and a black SUV pulling in with lights flashing. And stepping out of the SUV with a smile that made Emma's blood run cold was Deputy Marshal Craig Winters, a decorated federal officer, a deacon at Sacred Heart Catholic Church, and according to what Emma had overheard, a man who had just planted something very illegal under 9 Harley-Davidson motorcycles. Gator followed her gaze, and understanding showed on his weathered face. Ah, he said quietly. So that's how they're going to play it. The door burst open, and Deputy Marshal Winters walked in with 3 parish deputies behind him. His uniform was perfect, his federal badge shining. Jacques Landry, he announced. I have a federal warrant to search your vehicles based on reliable information about drug trafficking. I need you and your friends to step outside, hands visible. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Gator spoke, his voice carrying something that made even Winters pause. Deputy Marshal, before we do that, I think you should know something. This young lady just came in here scared half to death to warn us that someone planted something under our motorcycles. Now, why would a 7-year-old girl risk approaching men the whole parish has taught her to fear unless she knew for certain we were in danger? Winters's face changed colors. The child is mistaken or covering for you. No, sir, Emma said, her voice surprising everyone by being steady. I saw you this afternoon at Papa's bait shop. You had bags, clear bags with white powder. You were on the phone saying the Bayou Brotherhood was a stain on this town and it was time for surgery. Those were your exact words. The silence was complete. Even the kitchen had gone quiet. Winters's hand moved toward his gun, and Emma saw something ugly and desperate flash across his face. But Gator moved with surprising speed, sweeping Emma behind him while holding up both hands peacefully. Now hold on, Gator said firmly. Nobody needs to do anything foolish. Deputy Marshal, I'm going to make you an offer. Let's all walk outside together. You, me, your deputies, and every person in this restaurant who wants to see what happens next. We'll look under those motorcycles together in plain sight with plenty of witnesses. Whatever we find, we deal with it right here, right now, in front of God and everybody. I don't negotiate with criminals, Winters spat, but his hand had moved away from his weapon. The presence of witnesses, of Marie with her phone now raised and recording, had changed things. Then you have nothing to worry about, Gator replied calmly. If we're criminals with drugs under our bikes, you arrest us and you're the hero. But if this child is telling the truth, and I think we both know she is, then you've got a much bigger problem than a motorcycle club. The moment stretched thin and clear. Finally, Winters nodded stiffly. Fine, we'll do this your way. They walked outside into the humid evening. A strange group of bikers, federal agents, deputies, restaurant customers, and one small girl who had become the turning point for truth. The motorcycles gleamed in their neat row. Gator approached his bike first, a vintage Harley with custom paint that showed a water snake coiled around a fleur-de-lis. He knelt slowly, making sure everyone could see, and looked underneath. His face went very still. Someone want to hand me a phone with a camera? He asked quietly. Everyone's going to want to see this. Rue dropped to one knee beside him, pulling out his phone and turning on the camera. Sweet Jesus, he breathed. Y'all seeing this? Emma stood between Marie and her mother, who had appeared running from the Dollar General down the road. From where she stood, she could see Rue's phone screen. There, zip-tied to the frame, were 3 clear plastic bags, each containing about 2 pounds of white crystal powder. But what made people gasp wasn't just the drugs. It was the evidence tags clearly visible through the plastic, marked with federal case numbers, and a small GPS tracker with its red light still blinking. Those are federal evidence bags, someone whispered. Those are official federal evidence bags. Winters had gone gray. That's impossible. Someone must have stolen them to frame me. Frame you? Gator stood, moving carefully down the line of motorcycles. Those evidence tags are numbered. They can be tracked. Every bag taken out of federal evidence has a paper trail, signatures, timestamps, and I'm willing to bet when Internal Affairs pulls those records, they're going to find your name all over them. One of the younger deputies, a kid named Thibodeau who had only been on the force 2 years, had gone pale. He pulled out his phone and began photographing everything. Deputy Marshal, he said, voice cracking. I think we need to call the FBI field office in New Orleans right now. You'll do no such thing, Winters snapped. I am the ranking federal officer here, and I'm ordering you to what? Gator interrupted. Help you cover up a frame job? We're taxpayers. We're veterans. Swamp Dog did 3 tours in Iraq. Cypress volunteers at the youth center teaching kids motorcycle safety. Rue donates to the food bank every month. He took a step toward Winters. Despite being shorter and lighter, somehow Gator seemed to tower over the federal officer. We're the people you swore an oath to protect. Instead, you decided we were too different, too scary, too outside your comfort zone. You decided to destroy us rather than live alongside us. Marie pushed forward, phone still recording. I've known you 20 years, Craig Winters. Your mama and my mama were in the same parish council. I watched you grow up. And I'm telling you right now in front of everyone that you've shamed your badge and shamed this parish. Other voices joined hers. Mr. Budro, the restaurant owner. These boys have never caused me a minute of trouble. They pay cash. They're respectful. They don't start fights. Mrs. Thibodeau, the deputy's mother who ran the library. They donated $3,000 to our reading program last Christmas, anonymous, but I recognized Rue's handwriting. The tide was turning. People who had crossed the street to avoid the bikers were now forming a protective half-circle around them. Phones recorded from every angle. Truth was being documented in real time. Deputy Thibodeau stepped between Winters and Gator. Sir, don't make this worse, please. More sirens approached. 2 FBI vehicles from the New Orleans field office pulled in, called by someone in the crowd whose sense of justice had cut through the chaos. The next hour passed in a blur of federal agents, evidence collection, and the careful taking apart of a corrupt officer's career. FBI crime scene workers removed and photographed every bag from under every motorcycle, taking pictures of evidence tags and GPS trackers. Emma told her story 3 times to different agents. Each time her mother held her hand, and each time Gator and his brothers sat nearby, a wall of leather and loyalty that made her feel protected rather than afraid. It was Deputy Thibodeau who found the final piece. A tablet in Winters's vehicle with detailed notes, dates, times, plans, names of other people he had targeted, mostly people of color, immigrants, anyone who didn't fit his vision of what Thibodeau should be. He's been doing this for years, the lead FBI agent said quietly to Gator. We'll have to review every case he touched. As evening deepened into night, and the crowd finally began to leave, Emma approached Gator hesitantly. He crouched down to her level, his weathered face gentle. You doing okay, Emma? She nodded, though her eyes were red-rimmed. I was so scared. You chose to be brave anyway, Gator said softly. Do you know how rare that is? Everyone says you're dangerous. I know what they say, Gator replied. People fear what they don't understand. But you didn't let fear stop you from doing what was right. Rue wandered over, his shadow falling across them. Little sister saved our lives today. She did, Gator agreed. Question is, what do we do about that? Emma looked confused. You don't have to do anything. In our world, when someone saves your life, you owe them, Gator said. Not money, protection. You're part of our family now, Petite. Anyone messes with you, they mess with all of us. He pulled out a small leather bracelet with a silver fleur-de-lis charm. This belonged to my daughter. She died 5 years ago in a car accident. She was about your age. She was brave like you. Stood up to bullies. Always did what was right, even when it scared her. Emma's breath caught. I can't take this. That's exactly why I want you to have it, Gator insisted, pressing it into her small hand. Remember that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right even when you're terrified. If you believe in the power of watching carefully, in trusting your gut feelings, and in the courage it takes to speak up when something feels wrong, then pause for a moment, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, because this story will remind you that heroes come in all sizes, and sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. 3 weeks after what local news had called the Thibodeau truth, Emma sat in her 3rd grade classroom at Thibodeau Elementary. The bracelet hung on her wrist, the fleur-de-lis charm catching morning light through the windows. Life had changed. News coverage had been intense, then faded. But in Thibodeau itself, ripples continued. Deputy Marshal Winters faced federal charges. The FBI was reviewing dozens of his cases. People wrongly convicted were getting new trials. And the Bayou Brotherhood, they were still there, still riding, still living their lives. But now people saw them, really saw them. Store owners greeted them by name. Kids waved at motorcycles instead of hiding. The walls built by 15 years of unfair judgment were cracking. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Fontenot, had handled the situation with grace, making it clear that Emma was still just Emma, a student like any other. But during recess, other children approached her differently now, not with fear or too much amazement, but with real curiosity and respect. Her best friend, Lily, who had stuck by her through everything, sat beside her at lunch. My dad said what you did was really brave, Lily said quietly. He said most adults wouldn't have had the courage. Emma touched the bracelet. I was just paying attention. That's what my papa always says. Pay attention to what's happening around you. That afternoon, a letter arrived at school for Emma. Inside was a simple note. Emma, the Second Chance Scholarship Fund is officially established, named in honor of your courage and in memory of my daughter, who taught me that doing right matters more than being comfortable. First recipients announced next month. You changed this town, petite. You gave people a second chance to see clearly. Merci beaucoup. Emma folded the letter carefully and tucked it in her backpack next to her homework. Outside the window, she could hear the distant rumble of motorcycles passing on the highway. Not a threatening sound, just the sound of people living their lives, finally seen for who they truly were. That evening at the dinner table with her mother and grandfather, Emma was unusually quiet. What you thinking about, Cher? Her grandfather asked. I was thinking, Emma said slowly, about how easy it is to believe what everyone else believes. How scary it is to trust what you see with your own eyes instead. Her mother squeezed her hand. That's called integrity, baby, and it's one of the hardest things in the world. But worth it, Emma said, touching the bracelet. Even when it's scary. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. We bring you stories that prove heroism comes in all forms, that courage isn't measured by size or age, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Tell us in the comments, have you ever noticed something important that others missed? Your story might inspire someone else. 2 months after that September evening, on a crisp November morning, Emma stood in Budro's restaurant, now decorated for the official announcement of the Second Chance Scholarship Fund. The first recipient was a young man named Marcus Dupuis, wrongly convicted 3 years earlier by evidence Winters had planted. The second recipient was a teenager named Celeste whose immigrant parents had been targeted by Winters's unfair practices. Emma wore her best dress and the leather bracelet that had become permanent. She watched Gator speak to the small crowd, watched Marcus hug his family, watched her community take the first real steps toward healing. It wasn't perfect. There were still people who crossed the street when they saw the bikers, still heated debates about the releases, still those who insisted Winters had been right, just caught on a technicality. But there were also new connections. Store owners who now greeted the Bayou Brotherhood warmly. Children who waved instead of hiding. Families who had hope again. As the gathering ended, Gator caught Emma's eye across the room and nodded. A simple gesture that said, "You started this. You changed this. You matter." And Emma, for perhaps the first time since that terrifying moment in the parking lot, allowed herself to believe it. Walking home under the November sun, past houses where people now saw her family not as odd, but as neighbors, Emma touched the bracelet on her wrist and thought about Gator's daughter, about courage in the face of fear, about the weight of witnessing and the power of standing firm. She was still just a kid who liked drawing and playing with her friends and helping her grandfather at the bait shop. But she was also something more now. Proof that sometimes the smallest voices, when raised in truth, can reshape entire communities. And in Thibodaux, Louisiana, on that November morning, that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Thank you for watching. If this story reminded you to trust your instincts, to speak up when something feels wrong, and to never underestimate the power of paying attention, please share it. Subscribe for more stories that prove heroes are everywhere. Courage comes in all forms, and sometimes the smallest person in the room has the biggest impact. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Emma's place?